Hello, everyone. I'm Cheryl Bassitt, part of the Expert Epic Entrepreneurs. I guess I should not say that fast. And I'm very excited to be here again today. This is the third week of our BizLean challenge for Epic coaches. And so I'm just really excited to bring this last piece to you because this is the fifth day around relationships. And it's probably is probably my most favorite piece of this whole thing because it is sort of the foundation that holds all of the conversations that we have together. Because what I'm going to share today are really 4 rules that are good at the kitchen table, the boardroom table, and beyond. Just really good rules to engage into life. And I really like to think of them more as kind of like guiding principles. But the truth is if we embrace these, we can live an epic life and have epic relationships around it. So I'm going to jump into that in a second. I do want to say, though, that this has just been such an honor for me to share as part of the 5 generations of women. And I shouldn't say women because we welcome everyone, but the 5 generations. And I am representing the 50s. Dottie is in her 60s. And then we have Stephanie in her 20s. We have Jennifer in her 30s and Yasmin in her 40s. And we're all sharing a different piece. We're all coaches and we all have this little piece that we bring. I'm thrilled that my piece is the relationship piece because it really stems from my commitment around family connection with some tools that I created that were recognized as one of the next best brilliant ideas for humanity. And it really is my heartbeat and my passion to be able to share that. And what I'm sharing with you, and I'll give a visual here in a second, because if you were part of the last live presentation that I did with Yasmin, then you would have seen what the placemat agenda looks like for a family meeting. But what I want to stress is that whether you have a family or you don't have a family or whatever your family looks like, because families are made up of so many things. We have our work families. It does not matter what your situation is. This is about how you can connect with anyone on the other side of an equation of where you're trying to have a real authentic relationship. And that's really what this is going to be about today. And I'm excited to share it. And we're going to jump right into it. And, I'm doing this one on my own. So I won't have anyone here to share the relationship experience with me. But I really think as I run through this, you're going to find some really amazing information in this. And get to hear a little bit about how it worked in our family, but again, how it can work. And I do teach this in companies, and I'll share some of those experiences as well. So let's get started. What I wanted to do was to screen share with myself, I guess, in reality here. But I wanted to show you what the placemat kind of looks like here, because I think, and that is not the right one. Let me grab this other one. My apologies. Here we go. Okay, and then let's get to the big screen, and I'm going to really, really hope that this is what you're seeing. I believe it is. I think I've done this all week now, and I got this stuff down. So here is what the family meeting agenda looks like. And again, this is for a family, but it's for any meeting. If there's pieces and parts of it that you might want to take for any meeting, but particularly for the family around this. But the piece I wanted to point out is down in the right-hand column at the very bottom. And I'm going to see if I can get rid of this. I'm assuming if you're seeing my screen, you're seeing what I'm seeing, and I'm going to hide that. Okay, so and this is pretty small, so it still may be hard to see, but down there you see where we have my social face. And I wanted to just come back to that because we didn't really talk about that the other day. But what you'll notice is that it talks about I was a good listener, I respected the duck, and we'll talk about what that means in a second. And then I lived above the mark, and I did share some of that the other day, and I'm going to share a couple things around that. But I'm going to repeat one of the stories because it was so profound when we first brought that into our family. And then I appreciated someone else's uniqueness. And so that's where we're going to, I wanted to show how the back and the front of this kind of go together in terms of how they relate. But this back side of the placemat is really where we had listed the four rules or guiding principles, if you will. And that's where we're going to start today. And the dream board piece is really great if you have smaller kids. But, you know, how many times have you sat in a meeting and some people just like to doodle? They doodle while they think, hopefully still paying attention, but they do. It gives people a way to sort of express, and that's what this was about. So the first rule up there, and this is sort of an interesting one, and this is one that Dottie and I have talked about a lot, because it is all electronics off. And, you know, really, technology is so amazing, and we, you know, that it really embraces our lives in ways, but it is energy, and it's the energy that we give to it, just like money is energy. And so there ought to be, in that space and time, where the person across from you is more important than the piece of technology. And yet I will tell you that in some of our meetings, having that piece of technology was really important for us, because we did all kinds of things. We had our family meeting, but then we also went into looking at watching videos together or looking up information together, all kinds of things that we could do that technology allowed to play a role in. But for the first 20 minutes or half hour of our family meeting, it was really more about making that eye contact and having that relationship. So when I did the Next Best Brilliant Idea for Humanity, it was built on the premise that today technology is going to connect us across continents, but tonight, can you go home and connect with your own family? And that's really where this started. But I know we've all experienced that meeting that we're sitting in, where someone is more attached to still watching their cell phone. And I'm guilty of it. And it's funny, because when we talk about this rule in the families, you would think it's the kids that would have the hard time putting down the technology. And I can tell you right now, it's not the kids that have the hard time, it's the adults. So the kids love it, but during the family meeting, for us, all electronics went away for at least a big chunk of our meeting, especially at the very beginning, so that we could focus on each other. Because real connection, as we talked about the other day, comes from not just our words, but how we express ourselves and our body language, and certainly the tone that we use. All those things play into that. So if you're going to really connect with someone, and you can do it on Skype, it's not that that's a bad way to do it. If that's the way you have to do it, then that's the way you do it. But if you're in the same room with somebody for a certain period of time, there ought to be that connection that can happen, where you're really looking at someone in the eye and having that conversation. And if you're on Skype, you do the same thing, because it's really no different. If I'm on Skype and I'm having a conversation with you, do you want to see me looking at you, or do you want to see me looking down at my cell phone while I'm talking to you? Because, you know, we're still having that face-to-face connection. So, you know, Dottie and I, like I said, we've talked about this a lot in terms of, you know, we don't want there to be a perception. I don't want there to be a perception that technology is anyway something that we don't embrace, because we do. But it does have, there is this place where it needs to be set aside when possible, so that you can have that face-to-face connection. So let's talk about rule number 2. Don't quack the duck. And now, this is kind of funny, because I think when people first see this, particularly if you think about your, you know, if you have staff meetings or commitment meetings at work or whatever it is, that seems a little silly, right? You're talking about not quacking a duck. But let me just assure you that what the duck is about learning to respect someone else's input and opinion, suggestions that they're complimenting. So when I say respect the duck represents what someone is offering. And so we always say that it should be respected and not rejected. Now, does that mean that every time somebody has an idea that it's a great idea and that they throw into the meeting? Absolutely not. Sometimes they're not good ideas at all, but everyone deserves to feel like it's a safe environment for them to be able to share. And even if your idea doesn't, sometimes, and remember this, sometimes the best ideas that we ever have come from the craziest ideas in the start. So just allowing someone to express themselves freely without that judgment or without being shot down immediately. And I've worked with many families where the second a kid speaks up, it's really the parent takes on the role of, well, that's not a good idea. Well, it's probably not. There's possibility it's not if they're saying that quickly. But guess what? How often is that child going to throw in a suggestion if every time they say something, somebody's going, well, that's a dumb idea. Now, what's interesting is when I teach this in companies, we put the ducks out on the table. And what we found is that most people don't even realize they're doing it. They don't realize that they're squelching ideas before they ever get a chance to get onto, a discussion board or on the launching pad. So if you can, what happens is that the second somebody does that, somebody gets to, quack the duck, squeeze the ducks. We actually have these little ducks. And I will just tell you that it really quickly brings to light the fact that it's really quick to shoot down someone's idea. We used to have don't shoot the duck, but now we call it don't quack the duck, just so we don't use the word shoot, especially with kids, because it's not a positive thing. But don't quack the duck. And it actually comes from, just so you know, this evolved, and it was a really profound part of our meeting, but it comes from a friend of mine who went to something called the Duck Club. And that's what they did. They had this meeting where you were allowed to share ideas, and no idea was too crazy or outlandish. And there, it was definitely an out of the box, there was no box kind of thinking, and everyone's idea. And if somebody didn't, they had these ducks, little stuffed ducks that they could throw at each other for fun. And that was an adult meeting. So it started as an adult meeting. And I will tell you, a lot of the things that we did around our kitchen table did come from our meetings with, came from stuff that I learned in the workplace or in other settings or in leadership programs that I attended. It wasn't just, that we developed these things around our kitchen table. What we did was I learned things. I brought them home to my family for these rules. We embraced them, and we narrowed them down to just these 4. And then, but these same rules now can go back into the workplace. So it doesn't really matter, again, where you are and what the dynamic is. These rules just make sense. The third rule is living above the mark. And I really want to talk about this because, and we did the other day, but I'm going to make this one a little bit bigger. Living above the mark is probably one of the most powerful things that we incorporated into our family. And it really still is a guiding force for us today. And it really is about taking that ownership in your life. And I think we all know that we can use more of that, where we're stepping up and saying, this is my part in it and I'm going to own it. But let me share this story. And I shared this story the other day, but it's such a powerful story. And I don't know of any way to express it better than, and in case you didn't hear it then, you need to hear it today as a first or even again. So I'm sharing this. I brought this home from a business meeting, and I'm explaining to them that when, my kids now, who are probably, I'm going to say maybe 13, I think David was probably about 13, my youngest. And I'm sharing with him that, well, when you're above the mark, you're taking ownership of your life. You're taking charge. You believe in yourself. And that if you're below the mark and you're blaming someone else or you're blaming something, that you can never really make a change in your life that's meaningful, because you're giving your power away. And, as I'm looking at him and thinking, 13, is he really going to grasp this idea? He looked at me and he says, oh, I said, does that make sense? And he says, I totally get it. So what you're saying is that last night when we lost our baseball game, we all just sat around and blamed the umpire because we thought he made a bunch of bad calls. But the truth is, we never looked at ourselves. So tomorrow night we won't play any better as a team than we did last night. And I can just tell you that in that moment, I really thought this was powerful. I fell in love with this after David shared that, because it really even brought depth to this for me. And for him to grasp that at 13, and I kid all the time and say, hey, the good news is your kids will get this. The bad news is they will also hold you accountable. And they have. I've had my kids say, when we were sharing the other day, and I said that I was giving all my excuses, if you will, for why I hadn't been working out as consistently or eating as healthy. And right away, David and Brian kind of looked at each other, and I didn't catch it quick enough. But, right away, I started to catch that they were giving a look. And then I hear Brian say, gee, David, doesn't it sound like Mom's being a little bit below the mark? David goes, I was thinking the same thing. And I said, I was like, you're right. Because I'm just sitting here telling you all the reasons why I, haven't taken ownership of this recently. And, I can blame all my circumstances if I want, but until I own it and say, in spite of that, this is important and I need to make those changes. Now, I will tell you, there are times, and this is really important, there are times when we are below the mark, but we know it. and we're not ready to step up and take the ownership of it. But it's that awareness that we have around it that's so critical, right? So in that moment, I could acknowledge they were right. I was not owning it, but I also wasn't ready that night to make that change. And if you stay there in that space, obviously you're going to be stuck. So at some point you're going to have to, and that's the acknowledgement that has to happen. That awareness has to happen, that if you're going to stay there, you're going to be stuck there. So only when you step up above it and say, this is my life, I'm responsible for it, then you can make that change. And so this became a very, very powerful concept that really changes how you think about things. And I know I shared the other day how Brian had a test, and I asked him how it went. He started to say, oh, it was the dumbest test I've ever taken. And without me saying anything, he immediately stepped back and he goes, however, given that I know that's how she likes to test, I guess I should study for it differently next time. So it was that ownership, Now, he could have gone and talked to the teacher. He could have just studied for it differently, but sitting there blaming her and just saying it's dumb wasn't going to change how he was going to do on the next one unless he was willing to take a look at it. So I would assume you get the point, but it's so easy to get caught in not recognizing this. And I would just tell you that each time you're giving an excuse for something, step back and take a look at it when others are giving, because only when we step into and then really embrace, and believing in ourselves, believing that we deserve to have those changes can also be a big thing. How do we focus on our strengths? How do we find those solutions? Which, by the way, Jen is going to be talking about next week in terms of how we find solutions and work through some of these issues. So that's going to be very powerful as well. And then, I'm sorry, that's actually not next week. Next week, we're doing wellness. I keep skipping over the wellness piece, probably because I'm still below the mark on it. I'm just kidding. And I'll actually be on some of those hangouts next week with Yasmin and Dottie, because they're co-hosting those. And then I will be just sharing some ideas around that, because it is something that I have also walked in and had to step up at some point above the mark and take ownership of. So, I feel like sometimes the best teacher, the best teacher in life comes from the experiences that we have. And so that's what next week will be about, is on the wellness. And then Jen will be teaching the week after that. So we really have 5 amazing weeks of just great information to get your biz lean and do your life lean and all those things going in an epic direction for yourself. So the last one, whoops, I'm gonna go back this way. The last one is, I guess I call it a bonus rule because we added it on later. We used to just have the 3 rules that sort of guided our meetings. And you know what, actually I want to back up 1 second. And I'm gonna take this off for 1 second because I think I have one here. Let me look. I'm doing this, yes. Okay. And I think in our, I got to figure out how I stop screen sharing so I can get back to, here we go. I don't want to stop the broadcast. And, okay, here we go, stop screen sharing. Okay, so I want to take that back off for just a second because I wanted to show this. Hopefully you can see it here a little bit, but you can see this little C-beam. And it's kind of, some of them are, let me see if I have another one here, because some of them are really more like this one here. This one's great, actually. This one is, if you can see it, it's a little more of a heart shape, which I love. I love hearts, right? So this one has a little bit more of that heart shape to it. But they come in all shapes and sizes, although this is about the normal size. They're about 2 inches by 2 inches or so, in approximately. And what they are, and we write above the mark on them. So they have the inscription of above the mark on them. And what those, we set those at our family meeting. And I wanted to bring this up because it doesn't have to be this. It can be something else that you deem, find something else and write above the mark on it. I fell in love with those because they are actually organic. They kind of feel like a buckeye, and they wash up on beaches all over the world, and families collect them as a means of earning an income. And so and it is a seed. And so it grows on something called the monkey ladder vine. And I thought it was such a great thing because the message that we put with it is that when your family chooses to live above the mark, you not only support another family a world away, but you're planting the seed for your own family's future. So we sort of play off of that, but again, you can write this on anything. The concept of above the mark is really what we're trying to convey here. But what we do with these in our meetings is we set them on the table, and we don't always need them. They're just there as a reminder. But let's say you have a really tough topic that you are discussing, and maybe it's one that's a little sensitive to people, that are at the table. And so it's sort of like the talking stick. When it's your turn, you actually hold the seed bean. And what that does is it reminds you that it's your turn to talk, and others need to respect that. But it also is a reminder that while you're doing that, it's not about just sitting there and pointing fingers and blame on other people. It's about owning up to your piece of it. And it really is an amazing way to have a family meeting so that everyone gets heard, first of all, but secondarily, that when you are speaking, it's a reminder to stay in your space of owning and is positive, and it really helps to work through issues in a much more that's why they have the talking stick, right? Similar concept. I had one family who shared with me, which I thought was great. Two things. One is the dad was not really excited about this. He hadn't been to a program that I had taught, and the wife had, and she thought it was, she was excited about it. She was really excited to take it home and share it with her family. But she got it home, and he just kind of looked at her like, I don't know about this. So I have a book that goes with all of my, it's like how to hold a family meeting, and it walks through some of this. And she asked him to please just read the book, and he did. And it's not a long book, so it took him, maybe an hour to read it. That just kind of gave some ideas about the family meeting. Some things I'm sharing with you now. And he said that all of a sudden he kind of got the aha about why this was really powerful and how it could really play into the family dynamics. So they sat down. So their first family meeting didn't go well. He read the book. Their second family meeting went really well, but he had younger kids. And I get that all the time where people are saying, well, how old should your kids be? And, I would just say that it's not about how old it is easier if your kids are younger. Obviously, anything you incorporate and becomes a part of your life is obviously easier when your kids are younger to do. However, that being said, it's really about your commitment, because when you're half committed to something, people know it. Your kids will know it. It doesn't really matter. If you're half committed, they're going to know it, and they're going to test you. However, if you're 100% committed, they may not like it. They may give you some grief in the beginning, but the truth is they'll respect you for your commitment. The challenge comes in is when you're not fully committed, you get that resistance. Because I can tell you, and I shared this last time, David thought the meetings were fun. Brian, not so much so. And so I would say family meeting, and he would, start going, and roll his eyes. And I'd be like, that's fine. Roll your eyes and then get to the table. So, because we're going to have our family meeting. And 2 minutes into it or 5 minutes into it, he was totally fine and engaging. And we had some of the most amazing discussions around things that we would have never talked about that really helped us to create strong communication lines to this day that I can tell you are profound for us. And my kids, we all know how to communicate. We all know how to support each other because we went through all of this, in a way that ended up being just a gift really for us in terms of how we could really work together as a team. So this gentleman was sharing that at their family meeting, everybody was talking over everybody, and they were younger. So they had started, so what they did for the first meeting, at least the first 20 minutes of the first meeting, was no one was allowed to talk unless they were holding the seed bean. And real quickly, as that got implemented and they realized that if they were going to talk over people, that they weren't allowed to be able to talk until they were holding it. It wasn't even a tough topic. They were just not listening. So it creates that listening. And so he said they did that for about 20 minutes. And by the end of that, everybody was catching on to how to be respectful. So real quickly, even the younger kids, and I think and I may not be right on the exact ages, but I think they were like, 6, 7, 8-year-olds. And so, they had to learn how to respect that other individual's time. So I just wanted to share that because, find something, it doesn't matter what it is, talk about what it means to live above the mark, give the examples, of what that really could mean, bring some reality to it, put it just kind of like hearing something but not knowing how it implies or what meaning it has in your life, try to have those conversations initially about what it could mean to live above the mark. Sometimes you can even think of famous people that you think own it and live above the mark, and others that you think don't, and we've had discussions about that. So just a very powerful tool. The fourth thing, and really the last thing, which again I said was sort of a bonus because we didn't incorporate this until later. And I'll tell you when we incorporated it in, I had gotten a request to speak in schools. And and let me just say, we had many, many discussions that were along the lines of what I'm going to be talking about, which is to celebrate our differences. And I've had somebody say one time, well, don't you mean that we should celebrate our common ground? Well, that's the easy part to celebrate, right? It's celebrating what makes us unique and different and not fearing and judging it. That's the hard part. So when I got the chance to speak in the schools, I really wanted to incorporate that as sort of an official rule. Now, we had one of our quotes, which I shared last session as well, which was that when you judge someone, you're not defining them, you're defining yourself as someone who is judgmental. And that quote, so we had a lot of discussions about how, we're not here to judge. We're here to understand that everybody has a different way of getting from, point A to point Z, which we also talked about, and giving them that benefit of the doubt, but also learning to appreciate the unique talents and skills. And I mean, I always say this, but man, would the world be a boring place if we were all the same? The beauty in the world comes from the fact that we're all unique, we're all different, we're all special, we all have something amazing to offer. Now, that does not mean that we have to celebrate somebody who's not celebrating others. And so obviously we have bad things that happen out there, and we have to step away from it. And it's not that we're supposed to be celebrating those differences, but that's not really about differences. That's about not respecting. And so I'm not suggesting that. What I am suggesting is that when we can learn to not fear just because somebody does something different or somebody looks different, even though we're all coming from that same place of really wanting to be living in harmony and in a respectful place with others, then I think that's what we need to celebrate. So I share this story because this is why it was so important for me when I was younger, in elementary school. A lot younger, obviously. So we're talking like years and years ago, since I'm representing the 50s generation here. But I was in elementary school, and the question, and you have to understand, I was sort of that shy kid. I was sort of that shy. I know that's hard to believe, given that now I end up speaking. So we all change, we all grow, but there was something that happened in elementary school that I believe is probably why I am here speaking today. And so this story really has so much meaning for me that I think it also shows that the power of how we treat another person and how we celebrate those differences is so important. So I'm in elementary school, and the question gets asked, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I don't know, for some reason, that question was just like the most exciting question to me. And I honestly, I remember some of the kids saying that they wanted to be attorneys and doctors and, firemen and policemen and ballerinas and, moms and teachers and whatnot. So I remember some of those answers, but I just could not wait for my turn. And being shy, that was sort of an unusual thing for me. So when it came to my turn, I said, I don't know exactly what I want to be, but I want to do something that can change the world. Now, yeah, I was a little strange because who thinks like that, right? So, but that was just so exciting for me to be able to share that. I thought that I could do something like that. And unfortunately, and I have to say, I went to a Catholic school. So at that point, I guess the nun didn't think it was appropriate to answer, and that I wasn't answering the question. So I got asked the question again. And so I shared again that I just said, well, maybe I could make something, or I could write something, and or just, do something that would change the world. And she still felt that I wasn't answering the question. So anyway, after the third time, and I still didn't give her a very definitive answer, because she even said, well, then you want to be a teacher, or you want to be, and I said, well, I don't know, maybe something else. And so for whatever reason, it makes zero sense to me this day. Maybe she thought I had a tone, which we talked about the importance of tones, and maybe she thought that I did because I was exasperated, maybe. But for whatever reason, she sent me to the office, and had this teacher that was there that day in training walk down to the office with me. And I got down there, and she didn't. It was really strange to me because I don't remember her saying a word to me on the way to the principal's office, and I was so scared. So maybe she did, and I just don't remember. But we got there, and the principal asked why I was there, and she told her, and she was just like, "This really doesn't make any sense. Just take her back to class." So we got to the door, and of course, at this point, I'm convinced that if she says, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" Because now I'm just like shaking, and I'm like, I'm going to be a nun, right? Because I know that's going to be the right answer at this point. And in that moment, this teacher in training, who I wish I knew her name, but I don't. But what she said to me that day was so powerful. And right before we walked back in that room, because that day my duck, my duck got quacked big time. She shot my duck. So she got down on my eye level, and she looked at me, and she said, I actually thought what you said was really, really beautiful. And she says, don't ever just try to fit in if you were really meant to do so much more. And she said, stay in that strength. And all of a sudden, everything I'd lost, I got back tenfold in that moment. And, it's sort of interesting. And I never really thought about it. I mean, it's always stayed with me, but I never really thought about the impact of that moment until somebody said, well, isn't that interesting then that you're now have created something that's been in the top 5 as one of the next best brilliant ideas for humanity. So, I think sometimes we just have to stay in our truth and appreciate those moments. So that celebrating, but the other piece of celebrating our differences is that, and what that story was really about for me was learning to celebrate myself. And I think sometimes we all feel like we have to dress a certain way or act a certain way or be a certain way to fit in. We want to, and particularly when you're in school, kids, it's that peer pressure that happens, right? And then there's bullying, and there's all these just crazy things that go on out there that, how do we step into our own truth? And as a kid, man, that's tough, right? You're figuring it all out. So I think the more that we can help our kids learn, if you're special, if you're unique, if you're different, you know what? You need a high five for that, right? Because this is not about coming here and living someone else's journey or being in the journey of what everyone thinks that you should be. And it's your journey, and you need to embrace it. And so the more that we can tell our kids that, man, if you're different, celebrate it. Just stand in the truth of who you are. And I've always said that kids are not meant to be molded. They're meant to be unfolded. Allow them to unfold in a beautiful way. As parents, it's sometimes hard to do because, you have people think, well, but my kids were supposed to do this or my kids are supposed to do that. And your kids are supposed to do, what was that quote I shared the other day that, we need to bring our passions to the world, because that's really what the world needs, is more people standing in their passion. Allow that to unfold in a really positive way for yourself as well. So I'm going to really end on that. Those are 4 rules. I think they're all powerful. Turn off the electronics just once in a while and really look that person in the eye, to be with them in that moment. Don't shoot down their ideas. Don't quack their duck all the time. Allow everyone to feel like they have a safe place to come and express themselves. And that, and it's really easy. My son came up with this idea the other day, and I was really like, are you kidding me? And he's 23, and I'm still like going, have you lost your mind? And I had to back up and let him work through it. He came to the same conclusion, but it wasn't for me to sit there to tell him that this is how he's supposed to think. That's his journey. I need to help him through it. So we had a good discussion about it. And then, the living above the mark, really taking that ownership, owning our lives so that we can make the changes and stand again in what is we want to get done and work towards it. And the last one being celebrate our differences, and not only the differences of others and the fact that we all have a common, we all really want to have this wonderful experience here. Most of us want to have this wonderful experience while we're here. We want to have healthy relationships, and we want to be healthy, and we want to stand and, we want to have financial success, all those things, right? We all want those things. And so it really shouldn't be that different in terms of the end game. It should just be that we're all going to get there in a different way. And if we can learn to appreciate and respect that, but then also learning to respect ourselves and appreciate what does make us unique, what special gifts and talents that we bring also. And so those are the 4 rules. They're powerful. And really, if you had just those as sort of the foundation for any meeting, you're going to end up with a really ultimately a positive result. Doesn't mean it's always easy, but you're always going to end up with everyone feeling like they were a part of something that that's blossoming and truly going to be special. So I'm going to end with that. I'm going to also, though, because we do all of our sessions by going through VAX, and VAX allows us to start to bring things in our lives and that we want. And so you know, the first thing is to take a statement, and it's a positive I am statement. It's not something you're going to be, you're going to do, or I will do. It is, I'm standing in my truth right now with it. And you can look at yourself or look in a mirror in terms of, you can look at yourself if you do a hangout. Otherwise, you do need to look in a mirror to see yourself. But you could look at someone else. And, you know, the one that I wanted to do today is that, you know, I'm living in abundance every day with health, wealth, and wisdom. I wrote it down just to make sure I wanted to say I'm living in abundance every day with health, wealth, and wisdom. And I'm going to say that in a mirror. I'm going to say that to someone who's that's a good person for me to support me. Ears and say it, because it helps to also bring it in. And then you can say I'm living in abundance every day with health, wealth, and wisdom. And then you can do the one that's the kinesthetic, where you're moving and you're excited, and you know, you can jump up and down, or you can do I feel, you know, really great, and I'm living in abundance every day with health, wealth, and wisdom. You know, whatever it is you want to do, just get moving and let the energy flow around it, and bring something, you know, some great vibes to it. And then the last way to do it is to put your hands over your heart and to really internalize what you're saying, and is that I live in abundance every day with health, wealth, and wisdom. I want to thank all of you for being here for this week. Get ready for a great week next week while we talk about wellness, which is another piece of our journey. And, you know, thank you to all the epic entrepreneurs out there. Thank you to our E3 group here with the generations, 5 generations being represented. And to all of you, I guess have a wonderful journey the rest of the way through. Thanks.